I was just playing with you guys. I was just reenacting my the last time I made a review about A Quiet Place. Yep. Years ago I did made a vlog about A Quiet Place. As far as I can remember, it was on my where I previously lived. Well, it's time for me to talk about it again since I just came back from watching A Quiet Place Part 2. The sequel that it took, it got sit on a shelf for a year because of the pandemic. Oh man, oh boy. Another one of those movies that was supposed to come out last year, but it had to wait, because you know what. A little bit of a recap of my opinion of the previous film, of the last Quiet Place. I remember liking it a lot. I only saw it once. I know that the first film was directed by even one of the actor who played the father in this one, which is John Krasinski. He really showed that he was talented. I remember that while I actually really liked the film, I did indeed have some nitpicks. Most significantly, some of the action of the movie. I wasn't a fan of the ending of that one. But for me, the biggest gripe that I had with the movie is that I was disappointed on the broken promise that the trailer gave us. Sorry. Notably, it was because while I really like the idea of a movie where everybody has to be careful on their surroundings because they don't want to make any loud noises, and even when talking, well, actually when the talking part is the one that dropped me off the film. I thought that the whole film was gonna be no dialogue whatsoever. Nobody talked. They were just making sign languages, gestures, as the words. But unfortunately, I remember that at the 30-minute mark, once they started talking, my disappointment began. I was like, ugh, you just miss an opportunity to make a movie, well, not kind of artsy, but at the same time a little bit kind of like it's having its own identity. Although, to be fair, the movie actually does have its own identity because the dialogue is still minimal. Although I really could have preferred that it would have been with absolutely zero dialogue, no matter the circumstances, because I love the premise. It is a great premise about a post-apocalyptic world in which the first one centered on a family that they had to deal with their mundane life, always trying to be careful of their surroundings, not make any noises, because, well, let's say that the world is now infested by these armored creatures that kind of look like the lickers of Silent Hill, in which they are blind, but they are very susceptible to loud noises. If you make one loud noise, these things will go and kill you. And kill you horribly. I do remember that the first movie, it started out with the death of one of their family members, which is the youngest girl or the youngest boy. I don't remember what gender it was, but the youngest one got killed off by a dumb decision. Actually not dumb, but more like a naive decision. But and I like some of the stuff that the character was going through. Now we got the part 2, in which I wasn't 100% very invested on the trailer, mostly because I was worried that this movie is gonna have a lot of the problems that usually sequels has, in which it's gonna try out to copy the same gimmick, but this time the dialogue, this time there are dialogue in the trailer, so this time I was like, okay, there's gonna be more people talking despite that what you promised on the last film. And also, in my mind I was thinking that I think the first movie was well off on its own. I didn't need a part 2. But lo and behold, we got it after a year, so I finally went to see it. And with a movie theater that was actually decently crowded, still doing their precautions just in case. And at the end of the day, I just came out liking this film as much as the other one, which is one of those rarities that it doesn't technically increases my my hype, saying that, well, this is one of the greatest, this is a great sequel, better than the original. It didn't go that far, but it didn't either go down saying that, I think the original was better, which personally it can be, but this one, but the benefit of the sequel is that it kept itself good enough and fresh enough to keep the good parts from the last film, and while doing some really small blunders, it just comes out more in the territory of being a little bit too nitpicky. Because and I will say this, that I do respect a lot the direction that this movie goes, but at the end of the day, I think that I don't want to overhype this film as much as it already has. A lot of people saying that it's one of the greatest horror films or something like that. I wouldn't go exactly that far, but I will still say that it's one of the better horror films that we have for, well, many years. Considering that the last one I saw was Army of the Dead. Before I continue, let me warn you that there's gonna be mild spoilers from the first movie. But now that I think about it, while you're watching this, if you haven't seen the first one, or probably you don't care. So anyway, can you believe that this movie actually started out with an opening that basically tells the whole the perspective of the family when the whole invasion started from day one. I mean, it's a typical scene that you see in these kind of horror movies, in which it is a beautiful sunny day, and then something from outer space came, and these creatures came along, killing everyone. So it was really entertaining, but it gives us some subtle information that is gonna be used for the rest of the movie, because then after this introduction, this origin story, we finally jump back right after the events of the first movie, in which you remember that everyone's still on the house. Emily Blunt's baby is born. And of course, the father figure, played by John Krasinski, he died. So what's left? Well, nothing. The family decides to move out because there's nothing left and there's no reason to stay in the house. And so they decide to venture up in the outside until, after a series of events, they have an encounter with one of their father's friends, which is a guy played by Cillian Murphy. He's pretty much kind of like a washed-out man who has to survive on his own since his family is dead. And basically, he just has his own space where he hides and all his traps and everything. They had this encounter. The guy is very reluctant to help them go, somewhere, until the daughter, played by Millicent Simmons. I forgot to mention that she is deaf mute because she can't hear pretty well, and also she communicates in sign language, which is a kind of benefit in this kind of world. Well, she is really eager. I don't remember much of the first movie, but she basically investigated some music from a radio sound wave in which it kind of proves her that probably there is technically kind of like a peaceful community in the outside, and she wants to go there. But of course, the brother is very reluctant. He doesn't trust her. She thinks that her idea that she is technically following the wrong footsteps like her father. So she decides to venture alone. And from that point is when the movie, believe it or not, kind of separates in two plots. Almost like an A plot and a B plot. We got the A plot in which we have Millicent Simmons going to find that island in order to find a peaceful community out from those creatures, and then she's accompanied by Cillian Murphy's character, because as reluctant as he is to help the family, he was begged by the mother, Emily Blunt, to bring her back to her. And while these things happen, we got also the B plot in which we have Emily Blunt with her with the son, played by Noah Jupe, staying behind on their checkpoint and taking care of the newborn baby. And honestly, at this point, I have to stop talking about lots of the elements of the movie, or else I will go for spoiler territory, and I am trying my best to not get into that. But I'll say this, at least, that the movie, despite dividing itself into two plots, is very simple, and it is easy to follow, which is technically a blessing in these kind of movies. There is some three-dimensionality on the character, as simple as it gets, and even when the character do some questionable decisions, at least you understand it. It also helps with really good acting that this movie has. You see all the characters having their fears, their motivations, their impulses. Some of them, I think that I could have needed some little refreshing, since I haven't seen the first movie since many years, because I saw that on the movie theater, and that was one and never again. But for the most part, they do really good. So they do even a better job than Army of the Dead. Oh man, I'm roasting this my last film unintentionally. Seriously. In terms of cinematography, I gotta say that it's very similar to the last film, except a little bit with the dialogues. But I will say, in terms of cinematography, I gotta applaud it, because it kept a lot of the style that it had in the previous movie, in which a lot of the scares is not necessarily has to be with the monsters, but is mostly the mood that it brings, in which it's basically the surroundings and that the tension that there are in a world in which you have to be extra careful with every single detail, or there are moments in which it's too quiet, but it's too quiet that is basically unsettling. It's almost like you're accompanying the characters on their journey or on their survival. But as you know, as a movie, they have to bring out the movie in which something happens, something unexpected happens, something loud happens, and then the monsters will come out the sorry for the loud cars outside. But I do want to say is that the movie lost a little bit the horror aspect that the last one had, because as far as I can remember, it took a while for the monster to be revealed in the first movie. But now that we know what they look like, again, looking like lickers from the Resident Evil game, they technically the mystery is gone. But when the mystery is gone, that doesn't mean that the threat is gone, because they're still lurking there. And I'm glad that the movie kind of expands a little bit its own universe, showing more, not only where the creatures come from visually as far as I can remember, but it also showcased that other lifestyle of other people. Even though I do remember like that in the last film, but it kind of escaped me. It only took me a while that I remember that there was another moment like that. What else I can? I also want to say that in cinematographic levels, I actually grew tense because there were some moments in which the character has to sneak around. You see them walk very, very, very carefully, and the camera it begins to shoot their bare feet, walking through the floor or passing through tables and everything. But a lot of the time they're walking in places where there's a lot of obstacles. And it makes you think, oh my god, it's gonna step on this, or they're gonna tumble this. Oh please no, please no. So much that the first instant that they do that, which is actually in the previous house from the previous film, they even had the gall to show us that freaking nail on the staircase. That nail, I remember. You know what? Now I remember why I don't want to see the previous film again, because it's that freaking nail that gave me a lot of anxiety the last time I saw it, and when it happened, it cringed me. And I can't believe that he kept it, even in this film. At this point, I can't believe he kept that nail. Yeah, there are moments like that. And by the way, speaking of that freaking nail, the main family, every time when I see them, that they're walking around in their barefoot, like they're barefoot again. I can't help that. In one instance, it reminded me of it reminded me of what was it, in the Earth film? That film of In the Earth, the one that I saw this year, which bored me to hell and almost killed me with epileptic. But at the same time, I still remember the guy who became barefoot, and he gets really, really injured. Oh my god! Now I got cringe again. Oh yeah, but one of the things that I want to nitpick because I don't want to overhype this film too much is that there is a few moments in the cinematography which I think they also did it in the last film, in which, if you remember, the main character, the character Millicent Simmons, she plays a deaf mute girl, and they wanted to create this gimmick in which sometimes the audio switches from the audience perspective to her perspective, in which she can't hear almost anything except her surroundings. Well, I think this is kind of like a nice touch. Partially, I kind of rather wish that they made this movie wholly on her perspective. You know, that we hear almost nothing except for a few moments. But of course, when you know, usually a mute film basically sounds like a boring film. But I think that a very clever director can manage to pull something out of that idea. There are some moments in the movie that sometimes you might personally go like, oh my god, why are you doing that, or why you're making that decision, or at least in my case, in the case of the Emily Blunt character, when she begs the Cillian Murphy character to get her daughter to come back and everything. I was questioning, like, woman, you're asking too much. The guy technically has no obligation to do any of that. But when you think about it, there is kind of like, they wanted to showcase kind of like a human side that they're trying to keep on these characters. But now, when I think about it, at least it has a better payoff than Army of the Dead. And I came back again talking about Army of the Dead. I don't know why I'm nitpicking Army of the Dead. I knew that it was going to be kind of like bad but for fun, but I'm not talking about Army of the Dead. I'm talking about how can I say, A Quiet Place Part 2. There are also kind of like moments in which, even knowing that everything is kind of dangerous, some characters had the galls to still creating unnecessary noises as they are. But again, the movies have the tendency to justify themselves. One thing that I do want to say, it's not spoilerish, but I didn't mention that the reason why the characters separate, apart from the Millicent Simmons character going on her own and then Cillian Murphy tag alone, is that the reason why the other are left behind is also because the little brother character played by Noah Jupe, he's left behind because almost at the beginning of the movie he gets injured by a bear trap. There was a moment in which the boy really began to scream really loudly, and I was like, boy, shut! They're gonna listen to you. I mean, I don't, but you know that it's justified because these things hurt. You practically can't lose your leg, and your body instinctively wants to scream, even when you just want to bite something. Is technically really difficult. So basically, there's always kind of like a justified reason of some of the characters' questionable decisions. And the side plot B, it's one of the things that I kind of wanted to go a little bit sadistically, because sometimes I like to play out a lot of the risk factor sometimes. There was kind of like a moment that I thought it was gonna go there, but for the sake of the audience who are really hopeful, luckily it didn't. I'm not gonna say what it is, but the only clue that I will give you is that it involves a time limit. That's the only thing I will say. What else I can say about this movie? I'm honestly, oh yeah. Now that another thing that I could a little bit nitpick about this film is kind of like the age gap that there is, because the last movie was done and filmed years ago, and this one they finished it from last year. And sometimes I don't know if it's just me, or there is kind of like a huge difference between the age gap of the children characters compared from one movie to another. Now that the children are well older, which contradicts a little bit that how can I say that the passage of time between the first film, the events of the first film and the other one. But maybe it's me. Again, I haven't seen the part one for a long time, but at the end of the day, despite all my criticisms to this film, I actually really recommend you to watch this film if you really like the first one. And as a movie, it's really good. It's a really well done film that, even though it goes into familiar territory in some parts, there are some things that it surprised me. It kept me on the edge of the seat for the longevity of the movie. And this is not something that is easily done when it's about sequels. So the movie proved me wrong that it didn't suffer too much of the sequel bait traps. I still like that even to this day. This movie as well as the other, it kind of shows their own identity to be easily recognizable, saying that, okay, I know how Quiet Place can be deferred as other movies. I wish they could have gone, the one that I said, in which I really wanted to see how it could go with absolutely no dialogue. But it worked what it wanted to do, so at the end, I give it my high recommendation of this film. So give it a watch when you